Let's just jump right into this explainer today because we are looking at the tragic mystery of New Londo. Now, if you're familiar with this world, you already know it's this incredibly haunting place, right? It's defined by untouchable ghosts and the suppressive darkness that literally feels like it's swallowing the light around you. It's a location that just fills you with absolute dread. But as we start combing through the evidence today, we're going to discover that the true horror of New Londo actually isn't just the abyss lurking below it. It's the incredibly sinister foundation the city was built upon in the first place. To really kick off our investigation, we need to look at the environment itself and ask one absolutely crucial question. Why build massive floodgates inside a cave? Seriously, think about it. The architecture of New Londo was heavily inspired by Mont Saint-Michel over in France, which is a famous walled island city, historically built to keep invaders out. But New Londo totally flips that concept on its head. It's situated deep within a cavern, so it's already naturally walled off from the rest of the world. It wasn't built to keep the waters or invaders out. No, it was built with massive floodgates to keep the water and literally everything else locked in.
So that brings us to Section 1, the mystery of New Londo. Let's step right into the ruins and examine the physical evidence left behind in this submerged crime scene.
Looking at the actual stonework brilliantly illustrates how New Londo wasn't built for defense like a normal city. It was designed strictly for containment. Just contrast it with Anor Londo, the glorious city of the gods. Anor Londo boasts this soaring, late Gothic architecture that loudly celebrates power. It's adorned with towering statues of gods and beautiful crests everywhere. New Londo, on the other hand, features an older, way more oppressive Romanesque design. It's built down in a dark cave, and honestly, the most shocking part, it is entirely devoid of cultural symbols. There are no crests, no banners, almost no statues. That lack of detailing is a conscious design choice. The architects wanted to make sure the inhabitants had absolutely nothing to rally behind.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how these specific clues point directly to the nameless blacksmith deity engineering this city as a prison right from the ground up. If we look closely at the structural features, we see incredibly complex mechanical gear systems operating the massive doors, giant waterproof floodgates that serve absolutely zero defensive purpose other than trapping water inside, and these highly specific floral and cog motifs intricately designed into the ironwork. And guess what? Those exact motifs perfectly match the armor of Executioner Smaug and the mechanics found way up in Anor Londo. This basically proves that the gods commissioned their very own master engineer to build this human city as a permanent, sealable cage right from day one.
Moving on to Section 2, Corruption of Four Kings. Let's take a look at our prime suspects and see how this builds into the corruption of the city's very rulers.
We can trace this tragic escalation chronologically, starting right before the linking of the fire. Lord Gwyn recognized the foresight of the city's leaders and gifted the Four Kings a fragment of his own lord's soul, which basically established them as proxy rulers of the undead. They were really meant to be wise leaders. But then came the massive turning point. The primordial serpent, Darkstalker Kaith, arrived on the scene and taught the kings the forbidden art of life drain. This overwhelming temptation led to the total fall of the kings into the abyss, and it caused the subsequent, horrifying transformation of the city's noble knights into those terrifying dark wraiths.
And it was this terrifying ability that forced the gods to brand the dark wraiths as enemies of all living things. So, what is Life Drain? It's the legendary power of the Dark Lord, specifically taught by Cathay, and the Dark Wraiths used it to literally absorb humanity from their victims. This uncontrolled, ravenous hunger for humanity created a rapidly spreading abyss right in the heart of the city, which obviously posed an unparalleled existential threat to the gods up in Anor Londo.
Which leads us to Section 3, the fall of Artorias. We now turn to the heroic victim of our story, Knight Artorias, who was desperately dispatched to halt this horrific threat.
Listen to this grim prophecy from Elizabeth the Mushroom. Without doubt, he will be swallowed by the abyss, overcome by its utter blackness. This perfectly captures the completely doomed nature of Artorias' mission into the dark. Despite being one of Gwyn's 4 premier knights, and even with a silver pendant explicitly meant to repel dark magic, his immense strength and willpower just simply weren't enough to permanently halt the corruption spreading from below.
It's a total emotional gut punch to realize what happened next. During his desperate, losing battle against the abyssal creatures, Artorias sacrificed his own cleansing great shield to form a protective magic barrier around his beloved companion, Sif, saving the wolf from the dark. So wounded, fighting with a crippled arm and a cursed sword, he was left completely exposed. He sacrificed his own sanity and succumbed to the abyss just to protect his loyal friend, eventually losing himself entirely to the very forces he swore to destroy.
But you know, his tragic legacy absolutely lived on, inspiring entire generations of the undead legion. The Abyss Watchers of Farron Keep bound their souls together by swearing to partake of wolf blood. They adopted Artorias' wild, ferocious combat style specifically to contain future outbreaks of the Dark. They would literally bury entire kingdoms at the very first sign of abyssal exposure, continuing the Wolf Knight's lonely crusade long after his real name was completely lost to history.
All right, Section 4, the Sealer's Heavy Burden. With Artorias defeated, we really have to examine the horrifying, extreme measures taken by the elite sorcerers known as the Sealers.
Seriously, think about what you would do in the face of the unstoppable abyss, because this agonizing decision meant mass sacrificing an entire civilization. New Londo was flooded without evacuating a single civilian. To seal away the Four Kings and contain the Dark Wraiths, the Sealers pulled the levers on those massive mechanical floodgates we were talking about earlier, and they drowned countless innocent lives. They destroyed a robust culture in a single instant, cursing the victims to roam those submerged ruins forever as tormented ghosts.
As you might guess, this atrocity took a massive psychological toll on the three Sealers in their crimson robes, completely shattering their resolve. If we track their fates, we see that two of them couldn't handle it and completely forsook their eternal post. Ingward was actually the only one who stayed behind, bearing that immense guilt while guarding the seal over the flooded ruins. Yulva just couldn't take it. She abandoned her duty to bring her unique healing magic down to the toxic swamps of Blighttown, where she most likely perished trying to do some good. And the mysterious third Sealer fled as well, and is heavily speculated to have eventually allied with the sinister knight Lautrec. The psychological weight of drowning an entire city just broke them. And here is a really surprising fact that makes this whole thing even more tragic. A single, unique school of healing sorcery was completely lost to the flood. Now, healing techniques are almost exclusively the domain of miracles in this world. So the fact that scholars here developed a completely novel way to heal using sorcery proves New Londo wasn't just some monster den. It was a brilliant, thriving human culture before the gods literally washed it away.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, Gwyn's Fear of Humanity. Let's uncover the grand conspiracy here and reveal why this beautiful city was engineered to be a tomb from the very beginning.
That lack of cultural symbols inside the city we mentioned earlier, it wasn't an accident. It was a calculated suppression of human identity. Lord Gwyn proactively quarantined New Londo's human populace. By allowing absolutely no statues or markers of pride, he deliberately stifled their culture to ensure they could never unite. On top of that, he used the Four Kings as proxy rulers to quietly manage the undead population from afar. This wasn't just a panicked reaction to the abyss breaking out. This was a preemptive prison.
When you look at the pattern, New Londo was just one piece of a millennia-long strategy by Gwyn to quarantine the dark soul using walls and fire. Just consider the mounting evidence. Gwyn banished the early pygmies to the heavily isolated ringed city at the very end of the world. He cast literal seals of fire on the armor of early humans just to suppress their inner dark. He completely erased the massive contributions of the human ringed knights from the history of the war against the ancient dragons, and he constantly manipulated human settlements like Olasil and New Londo. It's a systematic, historical campaign of oppression.
Lord Gwyn trembled at the dark, clinging to his age of fire and in dire fear of humans. This revelation from Darkstalker Cathay is the ultimate twist, exposing that the true motivation behind everything was simply a god's desperate fear of the natural order. Cathay reveals that Gwyn knew the Age of Fire was unnatural to prolong indefinitely, and that the Age of Dark, the true age of humanity, was naturally destined to follow. So, to prevent his own obsolescence, he chained humanity down in the dark and completely rewrote history.
So I'll leave you with this provocative thought, and I want to challenge you to rethink everything you know about the supposedly righteous architects of this world. If the gods engineered entire cultures just to imprison them, strip them of their history, and ultimately drown them at the very first sign of their true nature emerging, who are the real monsters of Lordran? Definitely think on that the next time you're gazing out over those submerged ruins. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the lore.